felt in my body, I feel like I could die. My own mom.
Week 2 of the Lorie Vallow Daybell trial has wrapped up, and what a week it has been. From a chilling jailhouse call with the Doomsday cult mom to wild admissions, we break down some of the major moments. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Well, week 2 of the Lorie Vallow Daybell trial has wrapped up, and if you think about what this jury has heard, a jury that by all accounts really hadn't known about any of these details beforehand, you have to wonder, what are they thinking right now? Now, of course, the question is, has the prosecution presented enough evidence as of right now to convict Lorie Vallow Daybell? That's going to be up to the jury to ultimately decide. Little quick background before we get into this. Remember, this is the story of the 49-year-old Doomsday mother on trial for first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder charges in connection with the deaths of her children, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan. Their bodies found on the property of her current husband, Chad Daybell. He actually faces similar charges. He's going to be tried separately at a later date. But Lorie Vallow Daybell's trouble really doesn't end there, because she is also charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Chad's now deceased wife, Tammy Daybell. You see, originally, Tammy's death was thought to be from natural causes, that she died in her sleep. But when the kids' bodies were found and her body was exhumed, authorities realized something else was going on here. And prosecutors explained that she actually died from asphyxiation at the hands of another. So as I said, on our week 1 recap, the jury heard a lot, and the same goes for week 2. Week 1 ended with the testimony of Zulema Pastenes. This is the widow of Lorie Vallow's deceased brother, Alex Cox, a man whom prosecutors claim was part of the plot to kill these victims. In fact, I think the evidence would suggest he maybe have been the person to actually carry out the murders. Well, if you recall, Zulema testified that Lorie told her JJ was going to have a short life. This is before he's killed. That Lorie insinuated Tammy Daybell died because she and Chad received instructions on how to cast demons out. Zulema said that Alex told her he was afraid he was going to be Lorie and Chad's fall guy. She even said on the night someone tried to shoot Tammy Daybell. Yep, someone tried to shoot Tammy Daybell. She survived. Zulema says that she overheard an angry Lorie on the phone saying, "Idiot, can't do anything right by himself," maybe in reference to Alex Cox. On cross-examination, the defense's angle was to push on her credibility. Is she really somebody you can believe? Because she's got some wild beliefs and perceptions as well. Now, at the beginning of this week, week 2, the defense questioned her about the day her husband, Alex Cox, died.
The fact that I went to work early on December 12th and Alex was fine, and when I came home, Alex was laying on the floor of my bathroom, dead. And then the paramedics came and they started working on him. And then they took him to the hospital, to the emergency room. And they worked on him for about an hour. And they brought me back into the room where he was connected to machines, and they were doing CPR on him. And then after many efforts to revive him, I had to give the okay to have the machines turned off. That is very traumatic, sir.
Right, and I understand that, and I'm not trying to be callous or anything. And I said, other than the death of Alex Cox, was there anything else that was traumatic during that time? That's all I was getting at. Was there anything traumatic that happened to you between your wedding and when Alex passed away?
No, that I can recall.
Okay.
Now, Alex Cox is just one of the deaths in this case. He died from seemingly natural causes, blood clots, although the timing of that's a bit strange. And one thing we haven't really touched on is how quickly all of these people related in this case died. So Charles Vallow was the first to die on July 11th, 2019. Just 2 months later, J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan go missing in September. Chad Daybell's former wife, Tammy Daybell, died a month after that on October 19th, 2019. And then Alex Cox, 2 months after that, on December 12th, 2019, he dies. So within 5 months, 5 people close to Lorie Vallow Daybell die. As I mentioned, Alex Cox's death was determined to be from natural causes, even though his comments seemed to suggest that he was foreshadowing something would happen to him. But the other 4 people were anything but natural deaths. And I don't know about you, but it seems pretty fishy to me, and I wonder what the jury could be thinking. If all of these deaths have occurred, and for Lorie Vallow Daybell not to be involved in any way, let's talk about one of them. Let's go back to Charles Vallow. So he was the first death in this twisted case, which occurred in Arizona, and he was shot to death by Alex Cox in what was initially determined to be self-defense. The claim was that Charles came at Alex with a bat, hit Alex, and then Alex opened fire. Is that the truth, though? Chandler Police Sergeant Nathan Moffat actually testified that there was a small laceration on the back of Cox's head, but it wasn't consistent with being hit extremely hard in the back of the head with a baseball bat by an athletic man. Moffat also testified that the evidence showed that Charles was on the floor when he was shot. And by the way, the jury in this trial is not going to decide if Lorie is guilty of conspiracy to commit murder of Charles Vallow. She is separately charged with that in Arizona. This jury is hearing the Charles Vallow evidence as part of what I believe is a common scheme or plan of Lorie and Chad and Alex. That when anyone got in their way, this is what they did. They got rid of them. Anyway, here is firefighter Scott Cowden explaining the day that he responded to the shooting of Charles Vallow.
When you responded out on July 11th, where initially did you respond to?
We responded to a residential house for a gunshot wound or gunshot victim.
Did you enter the residence when you initially responded?
Yes.
And when you entered the residence, did you locate the individual that had been shot?
Yes.
What did you observe regarding that individual?
We were led into the house by a Chandler police officer. They were on scene before us, and when you went into that front door, that entry room is where we found Charles laying on the ground, on the floor, on his back, and he appeared to be unconscious as you approached him.
And when you say Charles, did you learn his last name?
Charles Vallow, we did learn. My captain on the crew was documenting the call. He would have been communicating with the Chandler officers who were communicating with other individuals on the scene that would be able to supply that information.
And you eventually learned his identity as well?
Yes.
Cowden actually attempted to perform CPR, but there was no luck in saving Charles Vallow. And then we heard from Arizona detective Cassandra Inclon, who investigated Charles' death. As if this case wasn't bizarre enough, we learned some key pieces of information, like how after Charles was killed, Lorie claims she took JJ to Burger King and then took him to school until finally returning back to the house. Now, that timeline of events has also been questioned as well, but just think about that for a second. And there's also no evidence that Lorie called 911 after Charles was killed, but apparently she told Alex Cox to call 911, which he didn't do until over 40 minutes after the shooting. And by the way, the evidence also seemed to establish that Lorie may have taken Charles' phone with her too that morning. So back to Detective Inclon. She observed Lorie to have some questionable behavior after Charles died.
Do you recall what Miss Vallow's reaction was?
I do.
And what was that?
She didn't have much of a reaction. When she was informed that Charles was deceased, she had responded that she already knew, and made statements that she was present when it had happened, which was new information to detectives, and didn't really appear to have much of a reaction.
So Lorie seems to be acting as if her husband dying isn't a big deal, or at least it seems that way. Now, I'll tell you, the defense tried to suggest, and what we've heard in other cases before, is it really fair to judge someone's reactions after a traumatic moment like that? Okay. Well, we did hear in some later testimony that months prior to Charles' death, Lorie claimed he was already dead. We'll get to that in a minute. So, after Charles is killed, Lorie packs up, her and the kids, they leave Arizona, they move to Idaho. And this is only the bizarre timing of events, as we know that Lorie and Chad would eventually get married just less than a month after Chad's former wife, Tammy Daybell, was killed. The timeline of events in this case is wild. It really doesn't look good for Lorie Vallow Daybell's case. But some of the biggest testimony from the second week of trial came from Lorie's 27-year-old surviving son from a previous relationship, Colby Ryan. And I will tell you, this was some of the most heartbreaking testimony. Maybe I shouldn't even say testimony, because really it was this recorded phone call between Colby and his mother, Lorie, while she was locked up in jail. Listen to him confront his mother about the death of his siblings.
You think you can hide from me? Well, because you murdered my siblings.
You can make judgments when you aren't there and you don't know what happened.
What happened?
Everyone's making their own judgments.
Mom, you've been shoving BS on my throat for a very long time. I'm going to talk to you.
You can be mad.
Hey, listen to me. I'm not mad. Listen to me. Fine, listen to me. I've sat there and prayed. I can't tell you the amount of pain that I have felt from your decisions. What did you tell me? What lies did you feed me? Why would you lie to me if you're with the Lord and you've seen Him, and I'm just talking purely to you, and you've seen Jesus Christ, where's the fear? Why wouldn't you tell me something? Why were you afraid? Why is everyone against you? Why is everything against my mom?
You can be against me all you want. One day, we will all stand there with Jesus. We will all stand there with Jesus, and you will know the truth of everything. Not for me.
I mean, this is devastating. You can hear the pain in his voice, but you can also hear Lorie be indignant, not giving him the answers, eluding these weird religious connotations. And from a legal point of view, if she felt justified, why not come clean and tell the truth about what happened? An argument could be made that she knows she's in trouble with authorities and she doesn't want to admit anything that would incriminate her. This is called consciousness of guilt. The counter argument is that maybe she didn't know what happened and she was kept in the dark about everything. But I mean, is that true? We really haven't seen a lot of evidence of that. But that phone call sure makes Lorie seem like a terrible mother in person. So on cross-examination of Colby Ryan, her attorney Jim Archibald focused on showcasing that Lorie was a good person, a good mother, tried to humanize her in a way.
Did your mother, Lorie, help you and Tylee with thoughts of lack of self-worth?
Yes.
Was your mother supportive of your decision to go on a mission and then to come home from a mission?
Yes.
Did she teach you about zombies?
No.
Did she teach you about casting out evil spirits?
No.
You never once thought your mom would hurt someone. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did you love your mom?
Yes.
Did she love you?
I think so.
All right, so moving on to more of what happened in week 2 of the Lorie Vallow Daybell trial. Last week, we heard testimony from Lorie's former close friend, Melanie Gibb. And this week, we got to hear the testimony of Lorie's other former friend, April Raymond, whom Lorie befriended when she and Charles Vallow lived in Hawaii for a period of time. Now, after Lorie and Charles moved to Arizona, Lorie and Tylee made a sudden visit to Hawaii, where April Raymond learned more about what was going through Lorie's mind.
Did she talk to you about what was going on in her home in Arizona?
Yes, she said that a lot had changed. She said that her and Charles were going to be getting divorced, that Charles had had an affair, and then the conversation changed to where Charles wasn't Charles, that Charles was a demon named Ned Snyder, and the conversation just kind of evolved from there.
Okay. So there's a lot in that answer, so let me make sure I understand. You had a conversation that they were getting separated or they were divorcing?
Initially, yes.
Okay. Who was visiting with Lorie Vallow when she was at your home at this time?
Tylee was with her.
Where was JJ?
JJ was with Charles, was my understanding.
Okay. And did the defendant say why she didn't bring JJ?
She said that she was done with JJ and that Charles and his sister Kay would need to figure it out.
Okay. And what did you understand that meant done with JJ meant?
Taken into the context of she's going through a divorce, I took it to mean that if they went through a divorce, that Tylee would go with Lorie and Charles would take on the responsibility of JJ exclusively, was my understanding.
Okay. And during this, you also mentioned that she talked about that Charles was no longer Charles.
Yes.
All right. What did she say about that?
In terms of...
When she said Charles was no longer Charles, how was that connected to her talking about separating from Charles?
Sure. So she had said that Charles was already dead and that there was a demon living inside him and kind of using his body as a host, and that the demon's name was Ned Snyder.
Did you follow up on that? Did she give you any sort of evidence of this?
When I asked, how do you know that it's not Charles, she said, because he's shorter.
First of all, if you're shorter, you're a demon. I gotta say, I'm a bit insulted by that. Not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. But more importantly, Lorie was done with JJ. Charles was a demon named Ned Snyder. Again, another friend of Lorie's testifying about her wild beliefs about demons and zombies. Raymond would also testify that Lorie tried to actually recruit her to a religious cult and that she would leave her family. Look, this is all important for the prosecution because they're saying that these religious beliefs provided Lorie the justification to murder. And according to April, Lorie said that Charles Vallow was already dead. And this was 5 months before Charles was shot and killed by Lorie's brother. So the talk about demons, zombies, Lorie's beliefs, it's a recurring theme in this trial. The odd incriminating statements, the behaviors of Lorie Vallow Daybell. All of this could ultimately be her downfall. Could a jury ultimately convict her based on the statements or the actions of her? Sure. But is it enough to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she murdered the kids or conspired to kill Tammy? Maybe the jury is looking for some cold, hard evidence. This is a circumstantial evidence case. But that brings me to Rexburg Police Department Detective Chuck Consadis, who took the stand in week 2. He testified about a Venmo payment being sent from Tylee Ryan's phone after she went missing.
What is significant about this document that aided your investigation?
Well, we had learned that Tylee's Venmo account was used and an IP address associated with it was documented. So we followed up on that, and we learned that the IP address was through the Windstream Communications. And when we contacted them, they say that, yes, they are in charge of issuing IP addresses through their communications company, and the IP address specifically was issued to the Residence Inn Airport in Kansas City, Missouri.
Okay. And why was that important for you to know?
Well, on October 10th of 2019, the $100 Venmo transaction was made, and we know through flight records that Lorie accompanied her niece Melanie Boudreau-Pulowski from Phoenix to Kansas City, Missouri to visit friends, and the transaction was made through using Tylee's phone from the information we had.
Does this document show those transactions?
It does.
Can you go to that page? What does this document show?
These are recorded Venmo transactions to Tylee Ryan's account.
Made from that IP address that you were discussing?
Yes. On 1010, the third row down, shows $100 sent to Colby Ryan with the message, "We love you." And there's the IP address there. That is the same IP address that we were able to validate from the Kansas City, Missouri resident.
So a payment was made from Tylee Ryan's phone on October 10th, 2019, which is about a month after she went missing. And the money was sent to Lorie's other son, Colby Ryan. Was this Lorie just trying to make it seem that Tylee was alive? Well, forensic accountant Michael Douglas took the stand next and testified about some questionable payments from Tylee Ryan after her death.
And you have mentioned this, but what date were Chad and Lorie married?
November 5th of 19.
And can you tell me how many payments were received into Lorie Vallow's Compass account on behalf of Tylee Ryan after her death?
4.
And what was the amount of the Social Security payment for each month that was received for Tylee Ryan?
So in October through December of 19, she received $1,859 a month. In January of 20, she received $1,888.
And what's the total amount of those payments?
The total being $7,465.
Okay. And how many monthly payments were there for JJ?
4.
And what was the Social Security payment for each month that was received for JJ Vallow?
October through December of 19, it was $1,951 a month. And January of 20, it was $1,982.
And what was the total amount of those payments?
The $78.35.
And how many payments did Lorie receive for caregiver benefits?
She received 4.
And what was the total amount of those payments?
The total amount would be the $39.02 and the $33.43.05.
Okay. How many payments did Lorie receive after she was married to Chad?
2.
And what is the total amount of those payments?
The $33.43.05.
And what is the total amount of the Social Security payments that Lorie Vallow received from October 2019 until February 2020?
That would be the $22,545.05.
And that is believed to be after the deaths of JJ and Tylee, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that on that document?
It is.
So if this was Lorie, she seemingly was sending money from her dead daughter's bank account into hers. And that's the main allegation from the prosecution, that Lorie conspired to kill the kids and ultimately did kill them, large part, to receive the benefits of Social Security payments. This week, it was also shown that Chad's spending habits changed after Tammy Daybell's death, since he was the beneficiary of his wife's life insurance policy, sending money to his children, a family trip. You get the idea. Now, not to mention that the jury heard about an email this week that was sent by Chad to a realtor in Hawaii after the kids disappeared, after Tammy dies, after he and Lorie get married. The email says, quote, "We are interested in seeing this property. Would the owners be interested in leasing this property to a couple with no pets or children?" I've said it before. There's been no smoking gun in this case. There's not a ton of forensic evidence tying Lorie Vallow Daybell to committing any of these murders. No recorded conversations talking about killing anyone. But all of this about the money transfers and the comments and the timeline, it's all so questionable. Moving on. About a month after Charles Vallow's death, David Warwick, Melanie Gibbs' husband, remember she used to be Lorie's best friend, testified against her, basically said Lorie asked her to lie to the police about JJ's whereabouts. Anyway, David Warwick visited Lorie and Chad in Idaho in late September, around the time that JJ was last seen. And when he visited Lorie and Chad in Idaho, he asked Chad about his wife, Tammy Daybell.
During the times you saw Chad, what was his interactions like with Lorie Vallow?
They were very loving with one another and affectionate.
Okay. Now, at this time, were you aware that he was still married to Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
Okay. Did the fact that he was married come up at all?
Yes.
All right. How did that happen?
I asked him I just asked him how his marriage was with Tammy and if she was a good wife, and he said he had no complaints, that she was a good wife, but he said her time was coming up, and that him and Lorie were gonna, go do the things that they had committed the do for God.
Okay. So when you say her time was coming up, Tammy's time was...
He said he had a dream that she was going to pass away before he was 50 or by the time he was 50.
Okay. And so that was Tammy was going to pass away before Chad was 50?
Yeah, by the time Chad was 50.
Okay.
The dream was like, I think he said 3 years previous.
Okay. And that, and then he said he and Lorie were going to be together. What did that mean?
That they were going to get married and they were going to go do their calling.
So about a month after this conversation that David Warwick had with Chad Daybell, Tammy Daybell dies. Chad was right about Tammy, but as we now know, Tammy's death is no longer ruled a death by natural causes. She was killed by asphyxiation at the hands of another. And remember, for Lorie, she's charged with conspiracy to commit the murder of Tammy. As long as the jury finds that there was an agreement to kill Tammy, if any of those co-conspirators, meaning Chad, takes an overt step in furtherance of that plot, then they all could be found guilty of conspiracy. So again, just another instance where the behavior and conversations of Lorie and Chad are highly questionable relating to the timeline of all these deaths. Now, something that we're starting to see in this trial that is similar to the Alec Murdaugh trial is the collection of lies, right? So Sydney Shank took the stand. This was JJ's babysitter. Listen to what Lorie told her about Charles's death when meeting her for the job.
While you were there, did she say anything about her husband, Charles Vallow?
She did. She had mentioned that he had just recently died of a heart attack, and that JJ was kind of having a hard time, like, understanding what had happened.
Now, maybe she lied about her husband being shot and killed so she wouldn't scare away the potential babysitter. Maybe. But back to David Warwick. Listen to what Lorie told him when he visited her and Chad in Idaho.
When you got there, did you see Tylee Ryan there at all?
No.
Did you ever see Tylee Ryan that weekend?
No, I never did. Never did see her. I never did meet her.
Okay. Were you told where she was?
I was told that she was attending Rexburg, Idaho College, and she wanted to be independent.
Okay. And who told you that?
I think it was Melanie told... if I remember, Melanie asked Lorie in front of me.
So David met JJ that day, but not Tylee Ryan. And this is about 2 weeks since the last time Tylee was seen alive. And by the way, we learned that Lorie was lying about Tylee going to college when a detective testified as well.
Did you look into whether Tylee Ryan ever enrolled at BYU?
Yes.
Did you find any evidence to find that Tylee Ryan enrolled at BYU?
No.
Also, I should mention that JJ's elementary school received an email from Lorie in September 2019. The jury learned about that this week. And this is, again, when we think the kids were killed. And in this email, she said that JJ was being taken out of the school, that he was being sent to Louisiana to be with his grandparents, that he would be homeschooled. And then the school never heard anything from Lorie again. And we know that is not true. That is not what happened to JJ. Okay, he wasn't sent anywhere. Oh, and Lorie also apparently told law enforcement at one point that Chad was just her brother's friend. I mean, we know that he was a lot more than just Alex Cox's friend. So basically what I'm trying to say is Lorie allegedly lied to multiple people, including the police. And as I mentioned, she asked her friend Melanie Gibb to lie about JJ's whereabouts. The question is why? If she is innocent and didn't know anything that was going on here, why would she lie? Why would she ask someone to lie? The prosecution is continuing to build a circumstantial evidence case against Lorie Vallow Daybell. Some of this week's evidence seems pretty strong in my mind, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there is enough to convict her beyond a reasonable doubt. In the end, it's going to be up to a jury to decide that, but we still have a lot of case left. That's all we have for you here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.